Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Adult Chair on Rash Pixel FM. I am Michelle Chalfant, and I'm wanting to rush through this whole intro because of our guest today. I have a very, very special guest on today, and we're going to be talking all about psychological abuse, but very specifically, narcissism. You can find out more about the show at theadultchair.com. You can subscribe for free by signing up for our mailing list and find us anywhere the finest podcasts are served with a quick search of The Adult Chair. You can join the conversation on Facebook or Instagram and make sure to request to join the Adult Chair private group on Facebook. And there you can learn all about living from vulnerability, and we talk all about narcissism, and we comment. And this is where this guest actually came from, or excuse me, all these questions came from today is from this closed group. So I'm very excited about that. And lastly, you all asked for it, so I have put another Adult Chair Level 1 weekend intensive on the calendar for April 28th and 29th here in Nashville, Tennessee. So go to my website and you can find out all the details there. Today we have a specialist with psychological abuse and narcissism. Her name is Shannon Thomas, LCSW. She's a licensed clinical social work supervisor and the owner and lead therapist of an award-winning private practice and counseling agency in North Texas. And she's the best-selling author of Healing from Hidden Abuse. Shannon Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to chatting and being able to answer some of the questions that came in.
Yeah, we have this private group, or it's the closed group called the Adult Chair, and I just put a little question out there, and I said, "Hey, does anyone have any questions on narcissism? I'm going to have a guest on," and I got 100 comments, and they're still coming in, and I said, "Oh my goodness!" So this certainly is a hot topic. So. Yeah, as you know.
These toxic narcissists are everywhere. And so, yes, I'm sure there's lots of questions.
Lots. And I just have a question because I've been a therapist for 25 years. Is this, from your perspective, like the word narcissism, I don't remember it as much 25 years ago. It seems over the last how many years has it become such a hot, it's just so-and-so's a narcissist, so-and-so, and I hear it more and more and more. Are you hearing that too?
Yeah, I am, but I'm also hearing it out of context. And I think as a clinician, that kind of rubs us the wrong way sometimes. And, some people want to talk about, we can get into this, but talk about, healthy narcissism. Everything about me just cringes because I don't think there's anything healthy about narcissistic personality disorder. So I think I've heard it a lot more, but I'm also hearing a lot more information out there that I don't think is clinically sound. So I'm very excited to, share at least one perspective. I'm just one voice among many, and survivors find what worked for them. But I think it's one of those things that, like many years ago, decades ago, we didn't talk about domestic violence. It was happening. We just weren't talking about it. So I think the concept of coming in contact with psychological abusers, I think they've been around since the beginning of history, of time, of people, of human nature. But I think we now have better terms for it. And I think that's just a progression of mental health and progression of understanding human behavior.
I would agree with you 100%. Yes. People weren't talking about it in the past where we're talking now. And therapy, I don't think it was not, it was like we were not allowed to go to therapy, or it was embarrassing, so nobody talked about it. Now it's kind of much cooler and hipper, and so many people do therapy. So I guess maybe this is why we're hearing it more. All right. Tell us about, first of all, I just thought we'd start out with, okay, so what is narcissism? What is it?
Yeah, great question. For me, I define narcissism really from the clinical guidelines of narcissistic personality disorder. And it comes in different forms. We have one diagnostic criteria. We don't do diagnosing through brain scans. There's some other, misconceptions out there. We do diagnosing through personality testing and through behavior awareness. And so narcissistic personality disorder has, 9 different criteria. But I think the interesting piece of it is that they can show up very differently. Grandiosity and self-importance, we, think of the Hollywood version. Well, that can also come out very covert. It can come out through kind of a religious lens or an altruistic. It can look a lot of different ways. So Grandiosity is just one of the criteria. Unrealistic expectations of the way they're expected to be treated is another. And, people can look up the diagnostic code of the DSM code for narcissistic personality. And like I said, there's 9 different criteria. But in a nutshell, we see sort of the exhibitionist narcissist, the one that's real traditional, that grandiose. We see the closet, more of a covert nature. And then we see the really toxic, malignant narcissist that might be then bordering into the antisocial personality.
We had Ross Rosenberg on the show about a year ago, and he was talking about that he feels like there's levels or stages. So I'm kind of hearing the same thing from you. So you could be like on a 0 to 5 scale, I think is what he used. Would you agree with that? So that's kind of what I'm hearing from you too.
I do. And I think in the years that I've been a clinician and a social worker, I've been doing it now, for 17 years. And I think that we do notice behaviors and we start to put them on a spectrum when we're hearing it from the survivors and looking at some of the behaviors of the toxic person, or we're actually in sessions with somebody that does fit the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. And yeah, there is a spectrum. In my book, I talk about, and it's kind of a bad kind of analogy, but it worked in my mind of, a narcissist will kind of run you over with their car and complain about how you've dented it. It's just, you're in the way. Mm-hmm. It's just like, you're in my way and you need to get out of my way. And that more higher end narcissist, malignant, will run you over and smirk. So it's kind of, there's some entertainment to the harm. And then going up the spectrum, it's run you over and back up to make sure all the damage is done. So there is a wide range, and that's why sometimes, survivors really want to have an answer of how to heal. Well, it really depends on what type of level of toxicity they were exposed to.
But what happens in childhood that creates a narcissist?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said in childhood, because there's some ideas that, there's these brain scan research, and what we don't know when we're looking at brain scans of adults is, were those parts of the brain that, light up empathy, were they there as infants? And we know with post-traumatic stress disorder that the brain will change under high intensity. So we can look at a brain, 10 years ago and it looked one way. Well, we can look at it now after trauma and it looks very different. So what I believe when it comes to narcissism and how it's developed is early on and very, very chronically, the message came to that youth, to that teenager, to then the adult, that they were somehow unique. It could be the really over-exaggeration of special, parents. I'm not talking about like the hovering, spoiling kind of parent at all, but we all want to be. We want to be loving and nurturing. I'm talking the extreme where none of the rules apply to a certain child that there is, and to a teenager. And so they get that message that the world is there to meet their needs, and it's chronic and it works for them. And so they continue believing and living that way into adulthood. The other way that we get this sort of at the core lack of attachment, that is the core of narcissism, is not through overindulgence, but through a neglect situation. But not everybody that's been in a neglect situation comes out narcissistic. So that's how we know it isn't just, trauma early on in childhood. So that the child or the teen that didn't get their needs met comes out into the world that everyone now needs to meet my needs because I'm entitled to that. And so that's how we get the other version, as opposed to people who go through really hard childhoods and come out into the world more loving and caring and nurturing and wanting to, be part of a healing community. Some youth will come out and it is about them and it's all about them and it always will be about them. And so for me, that's how the personality disorder is developed.
So it's one extreme or the other. So it's either you're putting me on a pedestal as a child or I am neglected. So it's one or the other.
For me, yes. With the research that I've done and what I've looked at, and it's a choice within that youth and through that youth's life and through the adult life to continue to operate in it. I've had a lot of clients come in, and this may be part of what we talk about down the road of, can people heal from this? I've had clients come in that realize that they have a wake of people behind them and they're the common denominator. And they realize that they're really not very attached in the way that they see other people be attached, and they want to work on it. And so we do. We work on how do we establish and rewire healthy attachments that didn't happen in childhood, either through the pedestal and overindulgence or through neglect. A true narcissist won't ever do that because life works because it's all about them.
Okay. So they're not really aware of what's going on within them because they're always focused on the outside, blaming other people.
Oh, I think they're keenly aware because if you ask and they're honest, they're like, yeah, I know, but it's a choice. There's a couple of research projects out of Italy that they really did a very good job of being able to look at and get folks to be very honest about the fact, I know right from wrong, but I choose what works best for me.
If we were to look at it again on let's just use that scale, like 0 to 5, if someone is like a 0 to 2 or 0 to 3 on that scale, then they would be more apt to make choices that would change their behavior and work their way out of being such a narcissist. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like, in other words, if I know, if I'm realizing listening to this, that, oh my gosh, I have narcissistic tendencies. I think I am one. Now what do I do? I'm hearing you say, like, when you're using that analogy with the person that was run over and then when they got run, and then when they backed up and ran over them again, those people probably wouldn't want to change themselves, but people that have, it seems to me like more awareness and want to be healthy would have more of a desire to change.
Agreed. And where I would have the little bit of a difference is that I kind of use a fence analogy. I think people that truly fit the narcissistic personality disorder by the criteria and by the whole makeup will not come to some understanding. If someone's listening and realizing, I kind of think I have attachment issues, I can be looking at some features of narcissistic personality, if they're then willing to get in therapy and to do the hard work, I would say they probably never were truly narcissistic personality disordered. They were very, very close, but wouldn't actually fit the criteria.
Okay. I get that. Okay.
I don't think the research really supports those that are truly functioning in the disorder a high level of change. Now, that's extremely different than borderline personality disorder. We've got some very good therapy tools and evidence-based interventions that work for folks that are highly motivated to come out of, behaving in a way that would fit the borderline personality disorder. That's totally different than narcissistic, though.
It is. Okay. And a few people actually did ask about that in our group. They said, what's the difference? And I believe there is a big gap between those two. Could you explain that just a little bit?
Sure, there's a huge gap. And I think that also shows why there are evidence-based treatments like dialectic behavioral therapy for borderline personality disorder, because there are ways to rewire those thinking patterns, those behavioral patterns. Borderline personality disorder has a lot more to do with a self-hatred, I believe, and a lot more to do with a lack of distress tolerance. So when we're stressed, it becomes really fast and furious quick, which is completely different than what we would see of a narcissistic rage.
Okay.
Totally different motivations. The way borderline personality is developed, all personality disorders are developed. I think that's a real misunderstanding. They are not the same as an organic mental health issue like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or something that's truly biochemistry based.
Okay.
That's why we can't diagnose children or teens with a personality disorder ethically, because their personality hasn't really developed completely until adulthood. But I think borderline, one of the key features is that I've seen some folks that there's more self-awareness of the erratic behavior, of the self-harm, of I'm kind of hot and cold with folks. but I don't want to be. I want to be really attached. There's some of that comes a lot inward with some self-destructive behaviors. Narcissists don't. They love themselves. They think that it's not really rooted in insecurity. It's very much rooted in, I really do think I am as fabulous as I project out to be.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Really actually believe this about yourself? Yep, I do. I've heard it. I've heard people say it. I really am special, and I don't know why everyone else can't see that.
Wow. So when you think about the ages of development of this, you would mention teen, or do you find that the roots are there and in place from like 0 to 6, or as far as this disorder forming, what are the ages that you find that it really takes shape?
Yeah, I think that it can be very much in adolescence, early tweens for me, because we can have some lack of attachment or poor caregiving in 0 to 6. But there can be some choices, to still engage. The youth can still engage in school and can develop empathy. I think that there comes a point where the child now starts to, around those 9, 10, 11-year-old years, if I'm going to get mine and I'm going to get mine at whatever cost. But I don't know that those younger ages have that sort of moral development yet.
Okay.
It kind of comes a little bit, if we look at child development, comes a little bit closer to around 7.
Okay.
Where I'm going to intentionally use other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the earlier years, it's much more just survival rather than a choice.
What about, I've had a few people did ask about what's the difference between narcissism or just taking care of myself or having concern or self-love. And people get worried like, I'm being a narcissist if I'm really taking care of myself. And I hear this all the time when we talk about self-love. People think, well, that's selfish. I can't do that. So there's a worry that if I'm taking care of myself and being self-loving, then I'm a narcissist. Can you please untangle that for people?
Sure, absolutely. And I think it's rooted in a real, and I don't mean this in a judgmental or shaming way at all, but just a real lack of full understanding of what boundaries are. Because I think when we come to a healthy place, and I really like Dr. Cloud's work on boundaries, the whole boundary series is very, very excellent. When we can have an understanding of, I got to put my own oxygen mask on first, and why planes tell us to do that. And that saturates down into our soul of like, I have to make sure that I'm well before I can be well for anyone else. That then is not going to put off some red flags if I'm being selfish, because the goal is I have to be well so I can be well for other people. Narcissists are, I have to be well so I can be even more well for myself. All about me.
Right. So it's all about me is classic narcissism. So it's different than self-love. Got it.
Yes. And the self-love, I think, has a lot to do probably with, do I deserve it? I think it ends up at its root coming back to, do I like myself enough to take care of myself? And we can say we do, but I think we have to work through, and I see this a lot in the office and in my own journey as a survivor. How much do I value being rested? How much do I value, taking time to exercise or to buy clothes that make me feel good about myself? I know that growing up in a very toxic home, many of us come out of those homes with messages of if we put into ourselves, we're being all those things that those toxic parents, yelled at or screamed at or shamed or all of those things. And I think it becomes, just a real sense of feeling guilty about wanting to be our best.
What if we are becoming friends with someone or dating someone, or we have a boss that is acting in a certain way and we're wondering, I'm wondering if they might be a narcissist. Are there clear or obvious signs that people can, are there signs that are just, there's a writing on the wall that says, okay, hold on, these are the classic narcissistic signs? It's not me, because I find a lot of us blame ourselves until we realize, hold on, there's something off with this other person.
Yes. And I think that when I talk about despair in stage 1 in the book, it's a lot of, I think I might be the narcissist, or I think I'm the problem, and this other person's telling me I am, and I know that I'm not perfect. And see, a narcissist doesn't know that. A narcissist really does believe that they are pretty good, even if there's tears, even if there's some other sort of, I hate myself. At the end of the day, there's a high sense of entitlement that they really don't hate themselves. So coming back to how would we be able to recognize it? I think when people don't give apologies, when we start to see a pattern of, hey, you hurt my feelings, I just need to talk about this, and they shut you down immediately and aren't able to even hear at all what your feelings are. I always talk about the ping pong match. We want to ping somebody, we want them to ping pong back, and there needs to be a little bit of a rhythm in that. Otherwise, we're pinging and pinging and pinging, and we're kind of doing all the work. And so that's a huge red flag when it comes to a friendship is this sort of a balanced teeter-totter? Are we both kind of moving in the same pace, or is there where I'm always the one having to reach out, or I'm always the one having to apologize and make things right? I think that's when we start to get into, this is not a balanced situation where I'm always having to make the amends. That can be different in a workplace. I think in, workplace narcissists, when we see folks doing a lot of the blame shifting, doing a lot of covert shaming. Being able to recognize what that looks like and what that feels like is really important to go, ooh, this is a lot of projection.
Yeah, I hear people ask me things like, am I crazy because I'm trying to have a relationship with so-and-so and they're blaming me for this? And it seems like it's always my fault, but I'm not sure that it is. And I typically say, no, you're not crazy. Let's look a little deeper. And it seems like oftentimes that person is a narcissist or has those qualities or tendencies. So when they ask that question, am I crazy? Why is this person not listening to me? They're blaming me all the time, which brings up another great question for you. The term gaslighting, it's so big right now. We hear it all the time. And can you please define this word and how it relates to narcissism?
Sure. And, I think some people, I've seen it online too, where people will have kind of different ideas of how they define it. For me, I really define it from kind of the traditional, there was a movie called Gaslighting, and it's basically the attempt of a toxic person to create an environment where the target and the victim really doubts their memory, doubts themselves, doubts what they see, what they feel. Because if a psychological abuser, which is really a brainwashing techniques, I mean, that's really what they employ at the end of the day, just like cult leaders do. If the brainwashing technique is that I can't trust my assessment of what was just said, I can't trust what I feel, I can't trust my whole view of what's going on here because this person is twisting and turning my words and this person is, putting me into a spinner and kicking me back out, then now I'm not even sure what we're arguing about or what we're talking about or what I was trying to say. That for the gaslighting for me is at the root. The movie was where this lady's husband tried to make her think she was crazy by flickering the lights. And when she would say, what is that? He would go, I don't see anything. So he created this entire home environment where what she saw and what she felt was not validated and was completely told that she was crazy and not seeing it. Well, she was seeing it.
Can you give us another example? I love that. I keep hearing about that movie. I need to watch it. But give us another example that you might have found even in relationships with a couple. Like, what would they do to each other, or what would the narcissist do to the person that is? What would the narcissist do as far as gaslighting to their partner? What would that look like?
I think a lot of times I see it in practice where it's conversations about plans. Well, I told you we were doing this, or I told you I was going here. No, you didn't. You didn't say that. Or, and it's the back and forth. Well, no, I did. And now you're trying to ruin it. And now blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden it spins off into this fight of, why don't you support me? And it's like, wow, but you never said it. And so I think it's about spending money as well. We talked about that I was going to spend this money. No, we never did. And it never happened. And then it turns off to where now we're arguing about the target's memory. Well, why can't you remember anything? And what's wrong with you? And why are you stupid? And you're crazy and you make things so hard. And the conversation never happened. And part of what narcissists do is they love chaos. See, I think that's one of at the root here when we also need to figure out, like, am I dealing with somebody healthy? People who have normal attachments don't want to have fights. We don't want to have chaos. We want harmony. Psychological abusers feed off of the chaos. They get an energy from it. There's something, it gives them adrenaline. Even if they're crying and saying, I hate the drama, well, they're in the middle of all the drama because at the core of it, they really do thrive in the chaos where we don't. We're exhausted. We're like adrenal, worn out. They're not. They're not at all. And so that's also a red flag of when we see someone who really seems to intentionally just stir it up.
I want to shift gears just slightly. A lot of people have asked me this question too. Signs that their parent is a narcissist. I know in my own practice, these adults that are, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old are coming in and they're realizing at this age that, wow, maybe it wasn't me that was wrong all these years. And we identify that their parent was a narcissist. So how can we identify, what does it look like if your parent is a narcissist? And again, they're putting it all on their kids, which is us. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And I think as an adult, looking back, it can be very much of, My self-esteem was eroded. It was always that I was wrong at things. That I see a lot of triangulation and a lot of scapegoating within siblings. So a lot of times when I have clients come in and they're like, I think I grew up in kind of a toxic environment, but I'm not entirely sure. We start identifying, if there's more than one child, well, who played the role of the scapegoat, and who was the golden child, and who was the favorite. And we start to see that toxic parents will kind of glob on to whichever child that gives them the most attention, positive attention. And then they demonize some of the other siblings and the other kids, and for really no reason. Sometimes it can be strengths. I see a lot where parents will have gone after, my client as the scapegoat because there was underlining jealousy going on. And I think that if we're just from a macro level, high level, trying to figure out, did I grow up in a toxic home? The questions we have to ask were, could I come and talk to them about things that were bothering me? What was the response that happened? Could I talk to them about things that they were doing that hurt my feelings? Could I talk about my fears and my goals and my hopes and my dreams? And real quick, we're going to hear a whole lot of no, 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 and no on that too. And we start to realize that the home was not conducive to attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start kind of pulling out, well, what kind of flavor of toxicity was that home?
So if we realize that our parent is a narcissist, and again, we're now adults, we're not children being raised in that home, right, how do we carry on a relationship with these people now? Because what I find too with my clients, when they realize this has happened and it wasn't them, it was actually their parents, right? Then they get angry, and they're like, well, I don't want to be in a relationship with them anymore because every time I'm with them, and I'll hear stories about how the parents, in these, I'm thinking off the top of my head of one woman who's, I think, in her late 40s or 50s, where, the mom is a narcissist and will just stop talking to her for months, shame her, even in, again, her late 40s. How do we as adults deal with parents that are narcissists, or one parent that is a narcissist?
Well, I think the very first stage is we grieve. We grieve the parents that we're not going to have and we're never going to have, because we have to come to terms with this mother, father, or both sometimes, because two toxic people can marry each other, and tag team parenting. And that's an extra special kind of recovery for sure. But I think that the first step is the grieving. I grew up in a home that was not healthy. I still have parents that are not healthy. These are the statements we need to make and really work through a lot of the tears, because it's kind of like a death of parents. Mm-hmm. If I come to a place where I know these people are never going to give me the emotional support that I need and never have, that's deeply hurting. I mean, that's gonna hurt a lot. So that's the very first stage that we get to, I think. And then the second is, if I choose to go ahead and stay in contact for a variety of reasons. People have kids, it's grandparents. I mean, there's just a lot of different reasons that people choose to stay in contact. Coming in contact with a toxic parent, but really recognizing who they are and grieving that they will never be what I need, puts us in a place of it's quantity over quality. We're just going to be around for a short period of time, short spurts. In my book, I talk a lot about how to do detached contact, because that's not limited contact. Limited is like, okay, I'm only going to be here for a short time, but the whole time is really, really hard. Mm-hmm. If we're going to be here a short amount of time, how do we be here in a short amount of time, but recognize the games and not get pulled into it? And that can be very difficult depending on the spectrum. A toxic parent can be lower level toxic, but still not healthy, or they can be very high toxic where we can't have our children around them.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Do narcissists respect our boundaries?
No, never. Ever.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. So I'm thinking, I don't know that we can have a relationship with them knowing that they're not going to respect our boundaries anyway. Sometimes the best choice is just to have no contact whatsoever with them. Correct?
Right. And I think the key word you said is relationship. We're not going to have a relationship because that's not possible. A relationship is a mutually beneficial, honoring and respecting one another, whether that's with friends or spouse or parents or extended family. We may have detached contact, very different than the word relationship. If for some reason that it fits for us better, that we don't want to, have no contact with our extended family, we feel like we can kind of, come in for Christmas and stay for 2 hours or 3 hours and get out. I always tell clients, if you want your toxic family to expect to honor your boundaries, you might as well tell the wall, because you're honestly going to get a whole lot more back from the wall telling them. So we just put our own boundaries in. We don't ask them. Well, we can tell them, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. And then exactly that's what they're going to do. So we have to have a game plan for it.
That's really, I like that you said to grieve that relationship, because I've got a few clients right now that are longing for the love from that parent, and they're not going to get it. They're just not going to get it. Whether they're dead or alive, they're still longing for that love. And I say, it's not going to ever, ever, ever happen. So I like the idea of grieving that relationship that will never be. And because it cannot be.
No, and the narcissist doesn't have any desire to change. If they live on chaos and they enjoy all of this and they enjoy their role of being in control, and even if they're closet and covert narcissists and they cry and say they want to get along, at the end of the day, what do they actually do? What do they actually do in behaviors, not just words? But I think if we go through the grieving process and we are in some sort of contact, because for us, that's the best choice, I think knowing that this person is never going to be what I need doesn't make us walk into that family environment needy, or walk in vulnerable, or walk in with hope. We walk in because we're there for whatever reason we've decided is important, but having hope that that relationship is going to change is not on the agenda. It just can't be. It's a setup. If we're continuing to go back and back and back, because abusers, like I say, abusers don't abuse every day. So toxic mom, toxic dad, toxic mother-in-law, toxic father-in-law, whatever the combination may be, will be nice sometimes. And that's when we go, oh, things are better. If we're religious, oh, my prayers have worked. Or, I finally have said it in a certain way that they get it. And then here comes the Mack truck to run us over of reality. They're not different. They're just playing a game. But if we show up, I know who these people are. I got it. I have to remind myself, I have to keep myself grounded. I'm only here for a short period of time, visiting or whatever. And we leave. We know what we're walking into, fully eyes wide open, completely aware.
That's great advice. Thank you. What if we realize that we are now married to a narcissist, and we realize after many, many years of being married, or even 1 year of being married, that and now that we have children, what do we do? Like how do you navigate a marriage with and having that realization that your spouse is a narcissist?
Yeah, I think the very first stage is to figure out how safe somebody is. We can come and go out of parents' homes, and that depends on how toxic they are, how safe we are. But when it's a marriage, that's day in and day out, and that's right in the same room kind of thing. So I think the very first stage is, how safe am I? Physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I think for a lot of folks, we have to just start with physically. How safe? Is this person so out of control that there is a life threat? And if there isn't, then we take the step back of, okay, a balanced life has a whole lot of different parts to it. And a romantic relationship is just one of them. So how do we look at that person's entire life, work or volunteering, physical health, spiritual growth, whatever that looks like, parenting, hobbies, friendships. And so for some clients, what we do, and for some folks, we step back and we say, can you make a whole healthy life where you are? And if they decide that they cannot, then changing that marital relationship is going to have to be part of the growth. Again, some people choose to stay, some people choose not to for a variety of reasons. And as a clinician, we don't get to come with our biases. It's about what's best for the client. But I do think that there are ways, I've seen it day in and day out, and we'll continue to see it even on the calendar today, people who have chosen to stay and have stayed well, not because they expected change from that toxic spouse, but because they went through the exact same process that they did with a parent or needed to, of grieving what this spouse is never going to be.
So going through that grieving process and just letting go of any expectation that they're ever going to change, but staying with them just maybe for the sake of the children. Is that what you're saying? Just learning who they are and dropping all expectations of change.
And really being able to assess if they decide they are going to stay in the marriage, because for a lot of folks, the level of toxicity is so high that there's no way that they can stay in that marriage at all. And then they're having to assess, okay, what's it going to be like for my kids going on visits? What's it going to be like, attempting some form of co-parenting with this person? And each individual situation is so unique depending on, what is their ability to have a career, to be financially stable. What's their support system like? It's so complex that's where we have to be able to pull out for each individual client. Do they have what they would need in order to stay and be healthy or to go and be healthy? And there's just no way to answer a blanket what works for everybody. But I think that at the end of the day, it's what kind of quality of life can I create if I stay or if I go?
And then if we choose divorce, how do we best co-parent with a narcissist?
Yeah, that's a whole other area of specialty for sure. And I think the term even co-parenting doesn't even apply, even though that's what the court calls it. There are folks, and I'm probably not the specialist in that particular area because it's so unique, but there are definitely some tools that people can pick up, and that is putting everything in writing. That's equipping their children for knowing what really healthy boundaries are. We're about to take the Healing from Hidden Abuse stages of recovery and write it for kids and teens so that whether it's at school or whether it's with a toxic parent, I think parents, the best thing that they can do if they end up going through a divorce or are divorced is without talking about that other parent, because then we end up getting into some really dangerous waters there. But just in general, really helping their children understand how do they communicate their feelings? How do they communicate what they need? How do they talk to safe people, whether that's at school or a counselor or the other parent, the healthy parent? How do they let their children know that they are unique and special regardless of what a toxic parent might say to them?
And at what age? I mean, is it appropriate to say to your child, I just want to talk to you about your father or your mother. This is what's going on. At what age? Or is that ever appropriate?
I think that if we're talking about the concerns of what parental alienation would look like, and like I said, there's folks that it starts to get out of my scope. I know what my lane is, and that's not my area of specialty, but there are folks out there that are very, very well versed in it. I think when we start to talk about specific parents and specific problems with them, I think we're really bordering on some things coming back and being misunderstood by the child, or the parent being accused of alienating. So I really encourage parents to talk in general terms. Here's what healthy people look like. Here's the kind of friends you want to have in your life. And we take it from I'm equipping my child to know their value in the world. That doesn't have any parent's name attached to it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Now, I think as kids get older, older into the higher teen years, if they're coming and they're saying, this is what they did, this bothers me, I think it's very healthy for the other parent to say, I can see why that bothers you. That is not jumping into here's what this person did to me, because toxic parents come in both gender, male, female, whatever. So it's not just, this is your mom or this is your dad. I do think there's a point where parents, if a child's complaining, I don't want to see this parent, or I don't want to go, and I don't like the way they communicate with me, I think it's damaging when we say, oh, well, maybe you're just misunderstanding what they're saying, or
right.
That's not really what they mean, or we kind of make excuses. I think when the child says, that hurt my feelings, we would say, yeah, that hurt my feelings too.
We want to validate those kids for sure.
Absolutely. I think the confusion comes in when we start to want to protect them from seeing it, so that we deny that it's happening, but it is happening. And so then that makes the child feel like, well, I don't trust that I just felt really bad, that just really hurt my feelings. And if it did, they need to know that's not okay. It's not okay that people say that.
I like that. Thank you. Thank you for all of those answers. All right. I have one more question for you. What is the attraction, or what is with the attraction, I should say, with codependents or empaths and narcissists?
Yeah, I think that those are different, because empath is kind of a personality type, and I think it's wonderful and amazing, and we need more empathetic people in the world. I think codependency then is higher on that spectrum of where we take an empathetic nature and it becomes damaging to us. So those for me are two different, and I think that the draw I think the draw is more from the narcissist to those two. I think that the narcissist is drawn towards people who have strengths, drawn towards people that they can be in a relationship with that feeds their ego. And if we're a real empathetic person and a caring person, and maybe caring almost to the point where it's damaging to us, where that then becomes the codependency, but not the empath, the narcissist will take advantage of that. And so I don't know if empaths and narcissists, or empaths and codependents, are really attracted to narcissists, other than if it comes in the package of "I'm wounded, I need you to fix me." If that's the billboard that the narcissist has kind of come up with, kind of the shtick, so to speak, the con, that could be appealing to someone with a really high empathetic nature. But I believe that the attraction is more of the narcissist to the empath.
Okay.
And then they do a lot of mirroring, and they do a lot of, I'm going to be what you are, so that you feel like you've met kind of the, another version of you. And they're running a con. I mean, they're lying.
Right.
And that's why we see these narcissists, go from looking one way with one target, and then you see them down the road and they have totally different hobbies. They look totally different. They dress completely different than they did a few months ago or years ago with a different target. And then they're on to the next target, and they have this new persona because they're just mirroring who they're trying to bring in.
Okay, Shannon, I could go on for another hour with you. This was wonderful. Are there any last points you want to make about narcissism?
Yeah, I think that real quick, when we start to pity them, as far as their childhood did this to them, or, there's some brain-based reason that they're like this. If that's where we're going to go, we might as well just pack up all education and kind of just stop, because then their free will is taken out of it. And I really don't believe that these folks aren't operating out of free will, because they can turn it on and they can turn it off exactly when they need to and with whom they need to. So I think true recovery is staying in. Yeah, something funky may have happened in their childhood, but, gather 10 people in the room and tell me who hasn't had some stuff.
Right.
Lots of us do, but lots of us choose to work through the wounds that would cause us to not be healthy people. Narcissists won't do that. So I would really encourage people to stay out of the pity trap, because that will hinder recovery.
This has been fabulous. I cannot thank you enough for sharing all of your wisdom with us. Where would you like people to go find you if they want to learn more?
Sure. I think the best spot is shannonthomas.com. From there, they can see how to get to my business if they're here in the DFW, the Dallas-Fort Worth region. If from there, they can also find me on all my social media, and we have a press page that kind of is kept up on the different type of writing that I've been doing, or being included in certain writings or interviews. And so shannonthomas.com is definitely the first stop, and they can find the book there as well.
And do you do phone sessions or Skype sessions?
I do not. I'm only licensed in the state of Texas. And so I do not, but we have some options for folks that are out of our area, so they can just reach me at shannonthomas.com, and we can go from there.
And I just want to share with everybody, as you know, for listeners of the Adult Chair, Audible is offering a free audiobook download of your choice with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out the service. I absolutely want to recommend Shannon's book. I downloaded it today when I was reading about it. Shannon, it looks amazing. So her book, Healing from Hidden Abuse, Shannon Thomas. So in Healing from Hidden Abuse, Shannon bridges the gap between pop culture and clinical advice, and also outlines her 6 stages of healing model. This is an absolute must download book for everybody. You can just go to audibletrial.com/theadultchair to start your 30-day free trial to claim your free audiobook. There you go. Shannon, again, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
And hopefully, I know I'm going to get a lot of questions, so maybe we can do a part 2 in a few months, because I know I'm going to get a lot of questions.
I love that. I love answering specific questions as best that I can. And if I don't have the answer, because there's a lot I don't know, I'll go figure it out, and we'll send them somewhere else where they can get the answer.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. And I will see you next time right here in the Adult Chair.